You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast, episode number 163. You break my record. Now I break you like I break your friend. Chung Lee, Bloodsport.
Broadcasting from a dark, windowless room in Hollywood when we really should be working on that next draft. It's the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast, showing you the craft and business of screenwriting while teaching you how to make your screenplay bulletproof. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome to another episode of the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Now, today's show is sponsored by Bulletproof Script Coverage. Now, unlike other script coverage services, Bulletproof Script Coverage actually focuses on the kind of project you are and the goals of the project you are. So we actually break it down by three categories: micro budget, indie film market, and studio film. There's no reason to get coverage from a reader that's used to reading tentpole movies when your movie is going to be done for $100,000. And we wanted to focus on that at Bulletproof Script Coverage. Our readers have worked with Marvel Studios, CAA, WME, NBC, HBO, Disney, Scott Free, Warner Brothers, The Blacklist, and many, many more. So if you need your screenplay or TV script covered by professional readers, head on over to covermyscreenplay.com. And today's show is also sponsored by the Heart Chart Screenwriting Masterclass taught by legendary screenwriter James V. Hart, the writer of Bram Stoker's Dracula, Hook, and Contact, to name a few. His unique story mapping system will teach you how to get your script ready for production and the marketplace. To gain instant access, head over to bulletproofscreenwriting.tv/Heart Chart. That's HART chart. Well, guys, I have a treat for you today. We have on the show the creator of a very seminal film of my childhood, but also in cinema history. We have the writer-director Sheldon Lettich, and he is the creative force behind films like Bloodsport, Russkies, Rambo III, Lionheart, Double Impact, and many, many more. But we focus a lot in this episode on Bloodsport because you have to remember that when Bloodsport came out in the mid-80s or so, mid to late 80s, there had never really been anything like that. Yes, there was Enter the Dragon, but it wasn't the same way. There wasn't like these characters and people from different parts of the world who had different fighting styles. Bloodsport was the very first time that ever was put on screen. And it started Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, and just a slew of other video games. So without Sheldon helping create Bloodsport, you would have not had all of these amazing video games and other movies that have been coming out for years. And one of the other amazing things about Bloodsport that it was marketed as a true story, but it wasn't. It was a complete fabrication. It was made by a man, the guy who came up with these original story based on a true story is a guy named Frank Dukes, who the movie is supposedly based on. And all of this stuff, which eventually came out that he was essentially a con man, according to Sheldon and the press, that everything was completely made up. And Sheldon and I go into the weeds about Bloodsport and Lionheart and Jean-Claude Van Damme, and he was basically there at the beginning of his career and how it all started and just the glory of 80s action film. So without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Sheldon Lettich. I'd like to welcome to the show Sheldon Lettich. How you doing, Sheldon?
I'm doing great today.
Thank you so much for being on the show, man. It is an absolute thrill. Like the young teenage boy that worked at the video store in the late 80s, early 90s is freaking out right now. So I do appreciate you coming on.
I'm actually happily surprised by just how big a thing these 80s and 90s action movies have become. There's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of fans out there. Just the other day, I noticed that there was a book on Sam Furstenberg, who basically directed ninja movies for Canon. There's a whole book about this guy. So Yeah, these movies they're like crawling out of the weeds. It turns out that there's a lot of people that have fond, nostalgic memories of that period.
No.
You know, when Van Damme and Schwarzenegger and Stallone and Chuck Norris. People have really fond memories of those movies. So here I am being interviewed in 2021.
It's fascinating because that time period, pretty much from the early to mid 80s all the way to the pretty much the 90s, that window, those movies cannot be made that way anymore. Like they just wouldn't be made, especially not with those budgets and those kind of stars. It's just such a window in time of a specific kind, like the country, the society, everything. I mean, when you see Arnold and you see Jean-Claude and you see these guys just ripped up, muscle bound, just sweating, and Jean-Claude with his splits and all this stuff, like that stuff wouldn't play nearly as well in today's world, but they're so wonderful to watch back then.
Yeah, well, in the late 90s, the studios realized, you know what, we don't have to deal with these action guys with these big egos and big muscles and all that. Let's just get some real actors like Keanu Reeves and teach them how to do some of the martial arts stuff. And then we've got stuntmen to do all the difficult stuff. We'll cut it all together. We'll make the cutting really fast. Nobody will notice. And you don't have to deal with Chuck Norris. You don't have to deal with real karate guys and try to make an actor out of them. We'll start with actors and we'll make them look like badasses. So that's what really changed. That was I would say mid to late 90s. It started shifting over.
Yeah, with Speed and Point Break and Matrix for Keanu. But yeah, then all these other actors. I mean, Liam Neeson, for God's sakes. I mean,
right. Yeah.
Liam Neeson's an action star. Like when you see him in Schindler's List, you don't think Taken.
Right, but the first guy to turn Liam Neeson into an action star was really Sam Raimi with Darkman.
That's right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
And Boaz and I, we knew Sam really well back then. I was doing Van Damme movies, and then Boaz wrote a Dolph movie. He wrote The Punisher, the first Punisher movie. And so we were a little surprised, Liam Neeson, you sure about this? And it ended up working out pretty well.
He did okay.
They've all went that way since then.
Absolutely. So tell me, how did you get started in the business? How did you jump in?
Well, it's kind of a long, circuitous story. But I started writing screenplays. I guess I was in my 30s. I just got this bug that I wanted to. I'll go back even further. I originally wanted to be a cinematographer, director of photography, and I went to the American Film Institute, and that was I was a cinematography fellow there at the American Film Institute, so that was my focus. And while I was there, I started getting interested in writing and directing. I was monitoring the writing classes. There were some classes taught by a kind of well-known older screenwriter. At that school, we had directing fellows, producing fellows, writing fellows, cinematography fellows. I was a cinematography fellow. I'm not a cinematographer now, but that's what I was interested in at the time. I wanted to be a DP. And so I started reading writing samples by some of the writing fellows. And I was very impressed by their credentials. Most of these people had, they had MFAs from a lot of big colleges. They MFA in creative writing, MFA in stage direction. So these were people with some heavy-duty credentials. Me, I had no credentials like that at all. I didn't even have a bachelor's degree. I was basically a photographer at the time. I was a commercial photographer for about 11 years. And so started reading these screenplays, and And I found myself feeling very unimpressed. I was reading these screenplays that these guys were writing, and thinking, well, I think I could do better than this. It's not very good. Okay. Then even though I had not done any writing before, I was just thinking I should give this a try, because I'm really disappointed with what I'm reading here. And then, as a cinematography fellow, I was supposed to help the directing fellows direct their short films. So every directing fellow had to make a number of films. We would shoot them on video at the time. And so I ended up working with a number of directing fellows. And again, they had some really amazing credentials, MFA from this Ivy League school, and directed plays in New York, and all of this. And there were a number of them that came from theater. So I had none of that in my background, but I would end up being the cinematographer. And I found that I was helping these guys or girls far more than I really should have been. They just really did not have a clue as to where to put the camera. They would be good at directing actors, but really wouldn't know where to put the camera, how to set up a shot, any number of things that I would help them with. And it just sort of came naturally to me. And so I started thinking, well, maybe I should give this a shot also. So everybody who went to the AFI had an opportunity to make their own film on video. They would give you the resources. You'd have the camera. Mm-hmm. You'd put together a crew with some of the other students. And so I made this little science fiction piece. Actually, the films generally were about 15 minutes, 20 minutes long. I made this piece. I based it on an Arthur C. Clarke short story. And it ended up being 45 minutes long. And I was just surprised at how well it turned out. And as I was working on it, I started thinking, you know what, I think I've sort of got a knack for doing this kind of stuff. Yeah. So we were working with the act. I wrote the script, also wrote the all by myself, based on this Arthur C. Clarke short story. So I started changing my focus away from cinematography to writing and directing. That's what kind of got, that's where the bug really bit me, was at AFI. Mm-hmm. And then I believe it was shortly after that. I'm a Vietnam veteran also, and there was this theater director named John DeFusco, who was putting together. He wanted to put together a theatrical piece about Vietnam, and he was looking for actual Vietnam veterans who were actors to be in this piece. There was no play. There was nothing written. He just had this idea for putting this together. I think he put something together like that before. He was like teaching acting in prison. He wasn't a prisoner. He was just an acting coach. Mm-hmm. And he thought, I'm a Vietnam veteran. Let me put together something about Vietnam. So he put an ad in. There were a couple of papers at the time. This was pre-internet.
Sure. What are these papers you speak of? I don't understand.
Huh? What is this paper you speak of? And there was this one weekly newsletter. I forgot what it was called now, but he put an ad in it saying, I'm putting together a play looking for actors who are also Vietnam veterans for a play that I'm going to be putting together about the Vietnam experience. So I got in touch with this guy, and I told him, look, I'm not an actor. I don't pretend to be an actor. I don't want to be an actor. However, I'm a writer, and I had written a couple of screenplays that dealt with Vietnam. So I was already writing at this time. He decided to work with me. So I was the writer member of this small ensemble that created this theatrical piece that ended up being called Tracers. And that actually, we actually put this thing together. We had a number of Vietnam veterans in it who were actors. And we staged it at a theater called the Odyssey in West LA. And it kind of became this little mini sensation. Ended up playing, they ended up taking it on the road. They got invited to perform it in New York City. It actually was Joseph Papp's theater, put the play on. And then it was in Chicago at the Steppenwolf Theater, where it was directed by Gary Sinise, of all people.
Wow.
I think that maybe helped get Gary Sinise into the mindset of exploring what Vietnam veterans are all about, because he's really been big on advocating for Vietnam.
Yes, he has.
And I believe that was the first time that he got involved with that subject, and then ended up playing Lieutenant Dan and Forrest Gump, and he's a big advocate for veterans now. But that was his first taste of that. So, anyways, Tracers became this little sensation. Didn't do anything for me career-wise, but again, it kind of gave me the bug. I started thinking, I should start focusing, rather than photography. Let me start focusing on writing and directing.
So when you started to change your focus to writing and directing, obviously writing was the way in to start, because you hadn't really proven yourself. It was, I'm assuming, still very difficult to become a director out of nowhere, even in the late 70s, early 80s. So your first script that I saw that got sold, at least, and produced, was a wonderful little cult classic called Russkies.
Yes.
When I again, you're hitting my sweet spot. 87 to 93. That's when I was at the video store. So I just saw everything. So I remember Russkies, who starred a very young Oscar-winning actor by the name of Joaquin Phoenix,
who went by the name Leaf Phoenix at the time.
Right.
Yeah. There's no Joaquin Phoenix on the poster. It's Leaf Phoenix.
Which is hilarious. But I guess that was like the stage name, because no one's going to go see Joaquin. You got to have some sort of cool name. I'm sure the agent told them.
But his brothers and sisters all had, I guess their parents were hippies, and they gave all the kids names based on something natural. So
River.
His brother was River Phoenix. And then there was a sister named Summer Phoenix, I believe. I think she's even in the movie. But I guess his birth name might have been Joaquin. But then for stage names, they gave names like Leaf and River and Summer.
That's brilliant.
And the thing is, he's really good.
Well, I mean, you could...
I'm not sure how old he was, but I think he was like a young teen, maybe.
Yeah, probably like 12, 13, 14, something like that.
Right, yeah.
But it looked great. So how did you get that, how did that whole thing come about? How did you come up with the idea for Russkies? Because for people not understanding what it was like in the 80s with the whole Russian, Cold War thing, it was a thing. It was a real... We were all terrified that the bomb was going to come at any moment.
Well, it's funny. I think this is maybe the first interview that I've done where I'm talking about Russkies, because nobody asks about that. They want to know about Van Damme and Stallone.
Well, we'll get there. But I want to take it
way back. We went way back to Tracers. Okay,
right. So I want to bring in Russkies, because I always like going down the road. Because first of all, people who haven't seen Russkies, it's just such a fun movie. The whole concept of it was so much fun. But how did you come up with that idea?
Well, I had a writing partner at the time named Alan J. Glickman, he really didn't have many movies made, but he was a writer. He was a real screenwriter. Had a couple of things produced, and he's the one that introduced me to computers and word processing, because before that, I was using a typewriter. Yeah, typewriter, writing things down on yellow pads. So we're sitting around at his house one day, just talking about various things. And I had a friend who was one of my closest friends in high school, who was in the Navy after high school. And he was stationed at a Navy base in Maine.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
So way up there in northeast. And it was a radio station, very remote, isolated radio station in Maine. And he told me one day they found a raft washed up on the beach, and it had Cyrillic writing on it. It was a Russian raft. Basically, the Russians, what's funny to me is even back then, people didn't believe that the Russians were surveilling our coast. And they were. They had submarines going up and down the East Coast and West Coast, listening in for radio signals, basically monitoring us, and probably making maps in case they wanted to do an invasion of how to, what's the best beach to approach. Anyways, it was a Russian raft that they had found. No sign of the Russians, just the raft. Obviously, they got into some kind of distress, had to abandon the raft. The raft washed up on the beach. And my friend had been told, you're never to speak of this. You're not to tell anybody about this if you found this raft. So anyway, I told the story to Alan, and we both thought, you know what, this is kind of a good basis. This is a good starting off point for the screen. And let's have some kids find it. Okay, so some kids find a raft.
Very 80s. Very 80s.
These kids are into 80s style action. This is right around the time.
When did Russkies come out? Like 86, 85?
It might have been right around then. Because I know I wrote it before Bloodsport. Mm-hmm. And I even invited Van Damme to the first screening of Russkies, which he came to and thought, you know what, I should have been that Russian guy in the movie. I would have done much better than him, which is true. I think Jean-Claude would have been better.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you.
Right. So these kids are into like war comics.
Sure.
And they've got a hero named Sergeant Slaughter.
Uh-huh.
Well, there was a wrestler who ended up calling himself Sergeant Slaughter, so we couldn't use that. By the time the movie got made, it got changed to Sergeant Slammer. But even so, the kids are into these comic books, and so they would like nothing better than to be war heroes, to do something like capture a Russian. Well, they find out about the raft, and then one Russian survives. Actually, they all survive, but one of them ends up on the beach, and he takes refuge in a clubhouse that these kids have set up. They've got a little clubhouse on the beach, and so they find him and they quote capture him, like, "Wow, we're real heroes. We just captured a Russian spy." Right. Hang on, let me just hang that up. So that was pretty much the basis for it. And we decided to have 3 kids. Yeah. And we ended up, not only is Joaquin Phoenix in it, but there's the blonde kid that was in those.
Christmas Story movie. Yeah, I forgot his name, but yeah.
I forgot it. Peter Billingsley.
Yes, he was. I noticed that too.
Who's now directing. He's a director. He's directing like a lot of TV stuff.
Yeah, he's a big TV director now. So then Russkies obviously gets you in the door. And I remember it being a moderate hit.
It was not. No, it didn't do well. Actually, it didn't do all that well.
Video. I think it found its audience in video and cable more than anything.
Yeah. But it didn't really open any doors for me. Just like Tracers did not really open any doors for me because it was this play. It was kind of an obscure play. It got a lot of great reviews, but it didn't open any doors for me.
So then, how in God's green earth did you come up with Bloodsport? And how did you get involved with Bloodsport? How did you meet Jean-Claude? Because before you answer this question, I just want everybody to understand. When you look at Bloodsport now, everyone's like, oh, that looks kind of like, oh, we've seen that 1,000 times. I'm like, but when Bloodsport came out, there was nothing ever.
It was really fresh.
The only thing that's even remotely close to it on a much smaller level was Enter the Dragon. and at a much smaller level. But the concept of these character fighters, which sounds like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat. I mean,
all based on Bloodsport.
You launched billions and billion-dollar industries off of this one movie. Not to mention a young Belgian guy named Jean-Claude.
Right. All right, so we'll skip ahead to Bloodsport.
Yes.
So here's how I got to that. I wrote a screenplay called Firebase, which is basically, you ever see Zulu?
Yeah, I remember. Oh, God, I remember Zulu, yeah.
Small group of British guys being besieged by thousands of Zulus in Africa. So I saw this movie and was really knocked out by it. And I came up with this idea, Firebase, which is kind of the same story. It's like a disparate group of Americans on this hilltop fire base in South Vietnam, and they get attacked by hordes of Viet Cong and North Vietnamese and have to fight them off. And it was a small group there were three different groups. There were Marines, Army, the Army guys were the artillery guys on the hilltop with the artillery pieces, and then some Army Rangers. And they all end up together. Not that they're supposed to be together, but they kind of get forced into this situation. And they all dislike one another at first, but then once they get attacked, then they start banding together, and it's basically teamwork against this invading horde. So anyways, I wrote this screenplay, and there were a lot of people that were very impressed with it, including I actually had a meeting. Walter Hill and Joel Silver had read it. Mm-hmm. They liked it, and Walter Hill wanted to make it his next movie. So I actually had a meeting with them about that. It didn't happen simply because Walter Hill had a deal with Paramount. This is right after, I think...
48 Hours?
48 Hours, right after 48 Hours. And so he brings them this big Vietnam War piece, and they basically said, guys, come on, nobody wants to see a movie about Vietnam. This is all pre-Platoon. Okay?
Of course.
So it ended up not happening. But in the meanwhile, I had gotten myself an agent based on somebody reading the script and saying, hey, you need an agent. And they got it to this guy, Harold Moskowitz. And Harold also represented this guy named Frank Dukes. And Frank had written a book that took place in Vietnam called The Last Rainbow. And it was 1,000 pages long.
Jesus.
Frank wrote this 1,000, like this, typewritten. He had written this book, and Harold was thinking, I could probably sell this book if I could cut it in half. So he got in touch with me and said, look, I want you to read this book, and let me know if you'd be interested in editing it down so that it's only 500 pages. So I read the book, and I was kind of impressed with it. It was pretty well written. Frank's actually not a bad writer, which is a surprising fact about him. Actually, shouldn't be surprising because he makes up so many stories. Anyways, so I was impressed with the writing, with the book, and he did a lot of research. So Frank used to tell people back then that he was a Vietnam veteran, he won all these medals, he was this war hero, all of which turned out to be complete bullshit. But he read books, he listened to stories from people, and he put this all together. And it sounded pretty authentic to me. And I was actually in Vietnam myself, and as I'm reading this book, and I'm thinking, well, this sounds like this guy might have actually been there.
All right.
So I wanted to meet him, and I got his number from Harold, and we got together, and we just kind of hit it off right away. And at the time, Frank had a couple of martial arts studios. He might have only had one at the time that I first met him. But he pretty much was telling people, he made up this myth about himself, that he was trained in the secret art of ninjutsu. There was he had a teacher, kind of like Mr. Miyagi and Karate Kid. whose name was Tiger Tanaka. Okay, Tiger Tanaka, by the way, happened to be a character in a James Bond book called You Only Live Twice, but Frank borrowed the name and said that was my teacher, and he was a descendant from, like 40 generations of ninja, and he taught me personally the secret art of ninjutsu. So he had this martial arts dojo, and another thing that he would say, he had some flyers for the school, and he would say that he was the first Westerner to compete in this contest called the Kumite.
Is that a Kumite real or not?
Apparently not.
Oh my God.
Apparently not. No,
oh my God.
He was making all this shit up because, and again, he did research. He read books. There were books about ninja, and there was martial arts magazines at the time.
Sure. And no internet, no Google.
No internet to check up on this stuff. And there was there was a movie called Enter the Dragon, which is basically, it's not by any means is it the same story. Enter the Dragon is basically about cops infiltrating this island stronghold that's run by this drug lord, human trafficking lord. And I guess that's the dragon. We have to find a way to enter the dragon. We've got to take this guy down. That's what the story's about. It's not about a tournament. But he happens to have tournaments on his island every so often. And at one of these tournaments, and actually I believe that's how Bruce Lee's entree to the island is. He's going there to participate in the tournament. So that's how he ended up with the tournaments. Anyways, so Frank had seen this movie. A lot of people had seen this movie. It was actually released by Warner Brothers.
It was huge hit. Yeah.
So Frank made up this whole story about this competition called the Kumite. And Frank there's this psychological disturbance called the Walter Mitty syndrome, or the Walter Mitty complex. This is a real thing. You can look it up on the internet, and there are psychiatrists that have studied this. And Walter Mitty, I don't know if you've ever heard of the film. Well, actually,
the one with Ben Stiller.
Well, before that, it was a short story by James Thurber, very short story that was turned into a Danny Kaye movie in the 40s called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. And Walter Mitty is basically the guy, just an ordinary guy, nerdy guy, who makes up these fantastic stories, these heroic stories, and casts himself as the main character in these stories. And that's what Danny Kaye was doing, trying to impress the girls by saying, well, I did this, I did that, and I'm a war hero. Basically, Frank did the same thing. He was fixated on Vietnam in particular because it was happening when he was a teenager. And so he read everything he could on Vietnam and then ended up making up stories about himself being in the Marine Corps, being sent to Vietnam, actually being recruited into some kind of special program. He was some kind of special forces guy.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So
right. I'm like, right. This is like, you're blowing my mind. None of this is true?
No. And it turns out that Frank is not the only one who makes up stories like this about his military heroics. And there's it's a phenomenon that's called stolen valor. Now, back when I met Frank, that term did not exist. Some people started doing research on this because, like, if you're a real veteran, if you've really been in Vietnam, and then you find out that people are faking it and saying, I won all these medals, I was in Vietnam, this hero. Well, it really irks you, okay?
To say the least.
Yeah. So there's this book called Stolen Valor. I've got a copy of it here. And they came up with this term, Stolen Valor. And Frank is even in the book. Frank is actually one of the people that they researched.
After Bloodsport came out and all that stuff.
I think it was after Bloodsport came out, right, because they mentioned Bloodsport in the book.
So okay, so wait a minute. So this is okay. So because I remember when Bloodsport came out, is that it was promoted as a true story. That was one of the biggest selling points of the film. You were like, this so surreal, like this really happened. I have to ask you, before we get to Jean-Claude, how the hell did this get passed? Like, this was a Warner Brother. It was a Canon release. It was a Canon production, but Warner Brother released.
No, it was a Canon release. Canon had their own releasing company at the time.
If I remember correctly, Warner Brothers was involved in some way, shape, or form with the release of that. Not wasn't? Maybe video.
Video.
Yeah, but the video.
Canon went bankrupt. They went belly up, and then Warner Brothers and I believe MGM raided their video library, and they got the rights to a lot of their stuff.
Right.
So Warner Brothers picked up Bloodsport.
Got it. That's how I knew it.
Not involved. Now, there was an article. See, Frank was telling these stories to everybody, including the editor of Black Belt magazine, who bought into it. I'm talking. Okay, now I didn't know shit about the martial arts world. I had not even seen Enter the Dragon before I got involved with Frank and Bloodsport. But he showed me this article in Black Belt magazine. Okay, there's no better authority.
Of course,
up on the internet back then. But here's Black Belt magazine, and here's an article called Kumite: A Learning Experience, and it's all about Frank Dukes. And Black Belt magazine is saying that this has some validity to it. Who am I to say it's bullshit? Okay, I can't do a Google search. All right. So I bought into it.
So it's like Catch Me If You Can, the guy from Catch Me If You Can. Like he's just telling us.
Absolutely.
He's just telling story, and he's getting it to at such a high level of artistry in this the BS that he's throwing out there that he's got now proof from legitimate people. So now so all of these things are coming together, and I'm assuming you hear about this and you're going to say, I got to write the script for this, right? Is that how it goes?
Well, kind of. Basically, look, Frank told me lots of stories, okay? Frank used to tell people that he was awarded the Medal of Honor for his heroics in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Not just me, plenty of people. So he would tell me stories. And some of this stuff was published in magazines. You got some of the stuff in the magazines about his various heroics and how he won all these medals. There's a photograph of him. I could get you the book, actually, if you want to see. There's a photograph of him wearing all these ribbons.
So he's all the way in. He's all in. He is all in on this con. He is all in.
It's a con, and he's a con man, basically.
Yeah, it's a con. I mean, this is
and he's really good.
Look, listen. We all might exaggerate a story here or there in our lifetimes, and you're like, oh, this or that. Fine, but this is a whole other level.
He invented a myth, a legend. He even calls himself the myth, the legend, the real Frank Dukes. And it's all bullshit. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, it's pretty damn amazing.
So the story for Bloodsport, like, did you make that story up, or did Frank help you just come up with the story and you just wrote the script? How did the creation of it come?
Well, it wasn't Frank. See, there's a difference between story and the real, like, facts, information. I forgot what the term is right now for what it is. Oh, source material. Mm-hmm. It's called source. According to the Writers Guild, there's source material, which is not the same as a story. Source material is the raw facts. Okay, like Erin Brockovich. Well, her story was source material. Mm-hmm. The movie Gandhi's life, source material.
Sure.
But Gandhi write the script? No, he didn't. But this is my true life story. Well, Frank was telling people this was his true life story. So he'd been telling me all these tales about the Kumite. He told me about, and I read the article. I've got the article here. Yeah. I could send it to you if you need some visuals to go along.
Sure.
Got the article. I've got all this stuff on Frank, the stolen valor.
Yeah.
Picture of him in the Marine Corps uniform, and turns out So there are.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
There are people that have started a couple of groups out there that do research into stolen valor.
Right.
Because they just got tired of hearing this shit. Okay, people lying about their credentials, lying about people that were not even in the military, saying that they were in the military and they won medals. Frank, it turns out, once these people started doing their research, then I found out what was true about Frank, because they got the military records from the government and they published this stuff. And basically, Frank was in the Marine Corps Reserves. So he went to Marine Corps boot camp, but that was about it. He was in the reserves, and he was a wireman, which means a guy who climbs up on a pole and strings communications wire. That's what he did.
He was a pole man. Right.
Yeah. So he was never sent overseas. There was nothing in his military record about any kind of specialized training.
Well, that's what they. But Sheldon, that's what they want you to think. Obviously, it's all behind the scenes. It's been it's blacklisted.
Frank.
I can't show it to you because I was in it. It's secret. Don't you understand?
Right. Yeah. The government is basically they've redacted everything.
That's what I'm saying.
It's the government. They're going to tell you that I'm lying, but I'm telling you the truth. And he wrote a book about himself.
Oh my God!
Called Secret Man.
Of course he did. It's okay. We'll
pause for a second.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you this stuff. All right.
Stolen valor. Sure. Got it. Yeah. I got it.
And Frank's not the only one in here, because
it's a pretty thick book, I'm assuming. Yeah, sure.
There's a lot of people who have been doing this, which is I just could not conceive of it at the time. I just couldn't believe, like, somebody's going to say that they were in the military and they were
yeah, sure.
No, who would lie about something like that? But here we go. Look, I don't know how well you can see it.
Yeah, the bottom one. Yeah.
And the top, that's him in his uniform.
Yeah.
All these medals. Okay, and the bottom one is one of his karate poses.
Oh my God!
I don't know if it's got the and there's his Kumite trophy. Okay, he's posing with
a Kumite trophy. Got it.
Yes, absolutely. Which a reporter
doesn't exist
from the LA Times ended up doing some research, and he found out that this is a trophy that he had made for himself at a local trophy shop in North Hollywood. And the guy even had the receipt for the money that Frank paid for. Now, here's his book, okay, An American Warrior's Uncensored Story. He was the CIA's finest covert operative. Oh, yeah, here's the back of it.
I can't. This is pure con man.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow. This is pure con man.
Absolutely, yeah.
This is not even just telling stories. You've written a book of lies. You've taken pictures. You falsified stuff. I mean, this is a sickness. This is an illness.
This is Catch Me If You Can, and we caught him. Okay?
All right. So we
still won't admit it.
So we established that he's an absolute crazy person, but out of this insanity comes an 80s action classic. Now, how did Jean-Claude get involved with you and Bloodsport? Because essentially, if I remember correctly, I followed Jean-Claude very, very well when he was just at that time. So No Retreat, No Surrender, I think was his first appearance. Black Eagle, I remember, was right there. And then came Bloodsport.
Okay, I'm going to give you the backstory and the chronology here.
Okay.
Because there was no Jean-Claude involved early on. Basically, Frank had been telling me all these stories forever. And one day we're driving in my car, and he's telling me about the Kumite, and he says, well, we had a nickname for it because it was very bloody, because it was no holds barred. There'd be blood all over the mat. So me and the other fighter, we called it Bloodsport. And like, Bloodsport? Whoa, that's a great title for a movie?
He came up with the name too.
You know what, Frank? Come to think of it, all these stories you've been telling me about the Kumite and the article in Black Belt magazine, that's a movie. we should sit down and write this. And we never did. We did not sit down and write it. Okay, but we talked about it, and so now I had a title, Bloodsport. Many months later, I'm editing this short film that I made, which is a whole other story. But I took there was one scene that I wrote for Tracers that was a bit too big to put on a stage.
Right.
The director decided, we can't use this one. Well, I really liked the story, so later on I decided, you know what, I'm going to make a short movie and use that story and some of the dialogue there. Mm-hmm. So I made this little movie called Firefight, and in 16 millimeter, shot it at Camp Pendleton. Mm-hmm. This is something I totally put together, and actually got Frank Dukes actually plays one of the characters in it, because Frank saw himself as an actor. He thought he had the chops. Movie star.
Right. So you're editing the short.
I'm editing the short in some very low budget post-production house in Hollywood. And next door to me, a guy named Mark DeSalle has got an editor working on one of his little films, which were porno films. Mark was producing porno films at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I got to talking with his editor and told him, I'm a writer, and this is a little movie that I wrote and directed. And he tells me one day, hey, my boss, Mark, wants to take you out to lunch and talk about a movie project that he wants to have written. So fine. So I meet Mark. We go to lunch nearby. And Mark has this theory about movies that everything runs in cycles. So, there's a cycle of science fiction movies. Lots of them get made, and nobody makes any of them. There's horror movies. Lots of them get made. Nobody makes any. Well, same is true for martial arts movies. And there haven't been any martial arts movies made lately. And so I want to do a martial arts movie. I want to put a martial arts movie together. And the story he pitched to me was called Kickboxer. Okay? So this is like the very early version of Kickboxer. You know the story of Kickboxer.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Kurt does not have a brother in the story that Mark first pitched me. But he defeats Tong Po in a fight back in the U.S., and Tong Po wants to get vengeance. So he sneaks into Kurt's house at night and throws a kick at Kurt. But Kurt either ducks or for some reason he doesn't get hit, but his mother comes walking behind him. Tong Po kicks his mother in the head and kills his mother.
That's a rough visual, even for the 80s. Yeah, even for the 80s, that's a rough visual.
Anyway, that was Mark's idea, Kickboxer.
Sure. And
so I listened to this, and I think, okay, well, this is kind of lame, but I've got something much better. So I said, Mark, look, I got a better idea for a martial arts movie. It's called Bloodsport. Well, Bloodsport. Wow, is that a great title? So I tell him about Frank Dukes and the Kumite, and this it's a true story based on this guy going, the first Westerner to participate in it and win. Mm-hmm. And the guy lives right here in LA. If you'd like to meet him, I can set up a meeting and we can talk about this further. So that was the next step. Basically, I introduced Frank Dukes to Mark DeSalle. Mark DeSalle's liking all this. And I think at this point, I had already been hired to write Rambo III. So he knew I was writing Rambo III. So that was kind of a feather in my cap. And so he's thinking, well, if this guy's working on Rambo III, he must be a good writer. Anyways, Mark makes a deal with both of us, and we sign contracts. And he hires me to write Bloodsport, and he makes another contract with Frank for the rights to his, quote, true life story. Okay? And this is all memorialized on paper in contracts, okay? And so I end up writing the script from Mark. And Mark gets the script over to Canon Films. It's kind of a long story. But basically, he got it to Canon. Canon was doing really good with karate movies at the time. They were doing those ninja movies. They were doing Chuck Norris movies. Well, here's another martial arts movie. It's called Bloodsport. Great title. Based on a true story. That's pretty cool. We can use that in the advertising. So Cannon ends up financing this film. We're making a deal with Mark. And then we had no star. We had no actor. I wrote the script for Mark. We had no actor in mind. We just knew this is a cool idea. It's a great title. It's based on a true story. So now we had to find somebody to play this character, Frank Dukes, who would have been in his 20s at the time. And I wouldn't say a number, there were not many names that you could plug into that role. We had talked about, like Chuck Norris's name was mentioned, but Chuck was, I think, in his 50s at the time.
Right.
Or 40s or 50s. He was too old to play this character. And I think Cannon was already working with Michael Dudikoff at the time, but Michael Dudikoff was not a martial artist.
He's an actor, right?
He was an actor. And they basically faked it with Michael Dudikoff. And we were all thinking, we need a real martial artist for this movie to make it believable. And then there's the famous story about Jean-Claude. Apparently this is true. I've heard it repeated a number of times in exactly the same way.
And from Jean-Claude himself, I'm assuming.
From Jean-Claude and from Michel Kesey, his buddy, who was there with him. But Jean-Claude had gone to the Cannes Film Festival a couple of years earlier, and he was basically going from office to office saying, hey, I'm Jean-Claude Van Damme. I'm going to be a big star. You should sign me. And Menachem was one of the people that he saw. And so he and Michel are driving down La Cienega Boulevard. And Jean-Claude says, hey, look, there's Menachem Golan. He was coming out of a restaurant. Do a quick U-turn. They pull up right in front of Menachem. And Jean-Claude goes up to him and says, hey, Menachem, remember me, Jean-Claude Van Damme? And he does one of his kicks. Basically, he used to do this to everybody. He would throw a kick at your face and miss your nose by 2 inches. He did that to Menachem. And Menachem just happened to be looking for an actor to play
Bloodsport.
Frank Dukes in Bloodsport. And he gives Jean-Claude his card and says, you come to my office tomorrow. And they used to have an office on San Vicente and Wilshire. And Jean-Claude goes there the next day, and Menachem gives him the Bloodsport script. And
the rest is history.
The rest is history. Yeah, the rest is history.
If I remember in my Jean-Claude lore, I remember seeing Jean-Claude in a little film called Break-In as an extra in the background. And that's a Cannon film. That was a Cannon film.
It's a Cannon film, but he was just an extra. Menachem didn't know who the hell he was. Nobody did.
He was just an extra. And all of a sudden, like, you're watching this, like, years later, you're watching Break-In, and you just go, is that Jean-Claude Van Damme dancing in the background? And it was.
So there's another movie we have to insert here.
Yeah.
Because it just so happened that at the time all of this was going on, we're looking for an actor. No Retreat, No Surrender.
Right.
In L.A. And Mark calls me and Frank and says, hey, looks like we might be making this movie with Cannon. And there's this young actor that I want you guys to take a look at. His name is Jean-Claude Van Damme. And let me know what you think, okay? So Frank and I go to see No Retreat, No Surrender in North Hollywood, I believe. And we're blown away. We thought he was fantastic.
Oh, he's the best part of that movie, no question.
He absolutely
no question.
Right. So so we call Mark and we give him a ringing endorsement. Yeah, this guy's perfect. And next thing we know, they're getting a director and they're scouting Hong Kong. They had a deal. Menachem had a deal with a Hong Kong producer named Charlie Wang, who had a production company in Hong Kong. They had all the cameras, everything you needed.
Yeah.
And so they basically, this is supposed to be a very low budget film. I think the budget was like 1.1 million.
Jesus.
And so yeah, one thing led to another, and
there he is.
They got Newt Arnold was hired to direct it, and Newt was a second unit, not second unit director. He was a first AD. He's a very well-known first AD. In fact, I believe he was the first AD on Blade Runner and some other very famous movies. But he'd never directed anything, and he had saved one of Cannon's movies. They were having trouble with one of their movies. I guess they had to replace the director, so they ended up using Newt to be like the ghost director for this movie. And Menachem was kind of impressed with them, and he said, "Look, because you're doing such a good job for me, if you keep on doing a good job, I'm going to give you a movie to direct." So they got Bloodsport, and Menachem gives it to Newt Arnold, and
the rest, as they say, is history.
History.
Now, so Bloodsport, I remember, comes out. I don't remember seeing it in the theater. I think there was a theatrical for it.
Well, I got a whole story for that. Because Menachem hated the movie. Now, the very first cut was really bad. Mm-hmm. All right, I saw the first cut with Jean-Claude and Frank Dukes, and we were depressed. They had, I think, Carl Kress was the editor at the time, and he just didn't know how to cut a movie like this. He was like an old-time Hollywood guy,
right.
Hollywood editor, and didn't know how to do the quick cuts. Really didn't get a movie like this at all. So the movie was terrible. Menachem thought it was terrible, and somehow Menachem got convinced that they should bring another editor on. And I can't remember the guy's name now, but they did bring on another editor who completely ripped it apart, put it back together again, and turned it into what it is.
A classic, as they say today. As a classic, as they say today.
And the first version that we saw did not have the music. This got some pretty cool music. Pretty cool
I love that soundtrack. I love that soundtrack.
And so it had none of that. And suddenly it's a much better movie.
Right.
But Menachem was still remembering that first version, and he did not want to release this in theaters. And we're talking about like the mid 80s, like everything got released in theaters back then. Mm-hmm. All right. You didn't go straight to VHS on anything unless it was a real stinker. And Menachem thought this was a real stinker. And I'll tell you how I know this from firsthand experience, because at the time I'd been writing a number of scripts for an actor named Leon Isaac Kennedy. Do you remember Leon by any chance?
I don't.
He starred in a couple of blaxploitation films called Penitentiary.
Okay.
And then Menachem, I think, produced Penitentiary 2, and then he ended up doing another movie with Leon for Cannon called Body and Soul. It was a remake of an old John Garfield movie. So Menachem knew Leon, and Leon co-starred in a Chuck Norris movie called Lone Wolf McQuade.
Great movie.
Okay, you know Lone Wolf. Leon was the black guy in Lone Wolf McQuade.
Got it.
And that movie did fairly well, and Leon thought they should do a sequel, because my character would come back in the sequel. So I think Chuck wanted to do a sequel also, but the sequel wasn't happening. So Leon had me write a script that was going to be a sequel to Lone Wolf McQuade, except we had a different title to it. And it was going to be very much like Lone Wolf McQuade. It was going to be a white guy who was the lead, the Chuck Norris role, and Leon was the co-lead. Leon's character was the co-lead. So I wrote this script, and Leon gets it to Menachem and Cannon, and Menachem likes the script. Leon said that I was interested in directing, and Menachem was gonna let me direct the movie. In fact, because I made this little film Firefight, which I blew up to 35 millimeter, it looked pretty impressive. It was a little movie. So Menachem saw that and decided he was going to give me a chance. So they were going to hire me to direct this. It was called Strikers Force. That was the name of the script. And Chuck Norris did not want to do it. So Leon, I had introduced Jean-Claude to Leon Isaac Kennedy. They hit it off. And Leon and I both thought, well, hey, this guy Jean-Claude should be your co-lead in Strikers Force. And Jean-Claude has got a 3-picture deal with Canon Films.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And you've got a deal with Canon Films. So Leon decides, I'm going to just take this straight to Menachem and tell him, let's do this movie. Canon, they wanted to do the movie. Mm-hmm. Menachem wanted to do the movie with me directing. And let's suggest to him that Jean-Claude Van Damme should be the co-lead. So we go to his office, and he says his term for Van Damme. He thought Bloodsport was terrible. He basically told me this to my face. It's a terrible movie. I'm not going to embarrass myself by releasing it in theaters. We're going to go straight to video. And well, what about Jean-Claude Van Damme? You got a 3-picture deal with him. Van Damme is poison. He called him poison. He thought Jean-Claude was a terrible actor. And he said, look, I want this movie to be successful, so I'm going to give you a real movie star. You're going to have a real movie star in the lead role, and that's Michael Dudikoff. Van Damme is poison. Michael Dudikoff is a movie star. So anyways, I gave Jean-Claude the bad news, and he was very upset about
This is pre-release of Bloodsport.
Correct. Pre-release. Yeah, nobody knew who the hell this Van Damme guy was.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I had a meeting with Michael Dudikoff about this project. He didn't like the script. Ended up going nowhere.
Sure.
Somebody at Canon, we had the new editor's name was Michael J. Duthie, by the way. Mm-hmm. And Michael fixed some movies for Canon. They brought him in to fix movies that were a mess. Mm-hmm. He was like a film doctor, basically, and he recut a few other films. So they brought him in to try and save Bloodsport, and he did. He saved Bloodsport big time. Somebody at Canon decided, you know what? People are kind of liking the movie. We should maybe give it a chance. Why don't we try releasing it just on the West Coast? California, Oregon, and Washington. Let's give it a test run. I think they might have done 25 prints. So they tried that, and it did really well because the title drew people in. The poster, based on a true story, the movie did well. And then they decided, well, okay, let's
roll it out
nationwide. And they opened it nationwide. And it's funny, I made a bet with Menachem. Fortunately for him, he didn't put any money down on it. But his big movie at the time, when we had this meeting in his office, was Missing in Action 3.
Yeah.
Okay, Missing in Action 3 with Chuck Norris. And they changed the title, so now it was Braddock Missing in Action 3, like they did with Rambo.
Right.
First Blood, now it's Rambo, First Blood 2. So Menachem decided to use the same tactic, and he figured, okay, this one's going to explode. This is going to do huge business. And I told him to his face, okay, Menachem, if you release Bloodsport in theaters, it's going to do better than Missing in Action 3. Mm-hmm. And he laughed. He said, You're dreaming, my friend. And those were his words. You're dreaming. Okay.
It's a good impression of him, by the way. It's a very good impression. It's a good impression.
Yeah, well, I knew Menachem well. I had many meetings with him, but I've worked with a number of Israeli producers, actually, including Menachem's successor was really Avi Lerner. Mm-hmm. He's not as big and as theatrical. In fact, he's not big and theatrical at all. He's very low key. But Menachem was very big theatrical, like Zero Mostel. Mm-hmm. So they ended up releasing it nationwide, and it did really well. I think it was Canon's highest grossing movie of that year. And we're not talking about huge numbers, but this is back in the 80s. So
if it made like $5, $6, $7 million, that's a huge.
I think it was even more than that.
Yeah, that's huge.
More than that. So they were really impressed. And
then I really found it odd. I mean, once it hit video, it was a perfect timing because when that video dropped, it was in the, I was talking, I think, with 86, 87, I think, somewhere around the world when it dropped because I couldn't keep it in the store. At the video store I was working, I worked at a mom and pop video store. We had to keep getting copies of it because people would rent it all the time. So people were like, what should we watch? We just like, go watch Bloodsport. And it was a constant. So I know it found a massive audience. So it hit like, when video VHS was starting to take off, Bloodsport shows up, and it's just kind of like when Terminator showed up with HBO, and there was just timing situations that just worked out, and it exploded.
It even did well in the theaters because I'll give you a little anecdote. Jean-Claude was living in this apartment on Riverside Drive at the time. I went there with him many times, and he had an answering machine. You know, we had answering machines back then. And it would beep once for every call that he had missed. Okay, so, we'd come back, you'd hear, beep, beep. Okay, I missed 2 calls. I'll listen to them. We come back after Bloodsport had opened in theaters.
Right.
We come back to the apartment, and there was a limit of 50 messages.
Right.
Beeped 50 times. And then basically reset itself. There were 50 messages on his answering machine. People were calling him from all over the country, all over the world, to congratulate him because it did make kind of a splash when it first opened in theaters. Mm-hmm. I remember at the time I was watching something on TV. Somebody was following the Lakers around. It was like a small group of LA Lakers, and they're walking by a movie theater. Hey man, let's go see a movie. What do you want to see? Let's check out Bloodsport. Okay, they see the title Bloodsport, and they went to see Bloodsport. But people were the poster was pretty cool.
I remember the poster. It's awesome poster.
You'll probably be able to do a.
I'll put a visual up. Yeah,
the poster was great. The post, and we had newspaper ads and everything. There actually was we actually had a little premiere on Hollywood Boulevard that Jean-Claude went to, and Forrest Whitaker was there too.
That's right. I forgot. Yeah, of course, Forrest. Yes, the Oscar, another Oscar winner that worked in a project.
He was nobody at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing him at the theater and going up to him, "Hey, Forrest, you're terrific in the movie. I'm the writer, by the way," and we were talking for a little while. But they had a premiere, and I have photographs of this, which I could send you. You probably want to put them up on the screen.
Sure.
But it was they ran ads in the newspapers that Jean-Claude Van Damme will be there in person, based on a true story, starring world kickboxing champion Jean-Claude Van Damme. And there was a big crowd. I have photographs of this. A big crowd showed up for the movie, and they gave away posters.
Amazing.
To the 50 people. I have photos of him signing the posters. But people were attracted by the poster that was in the newspapers. Mm-hmm. And it opened at, I think, 2 theaters, and one was on Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah, the Chinese probably. Yeah.
We had a crowd. The theater was packed. So
it's so remarkable, the whole story of Bloodsport, how that came about, and then that basically launches Jean-Claude into the stratosphere. But before we go into because we might want to talk a little bit about Cyborg and your involvement with that and Rambo. There's a story that Boaz Yankin, who's on my other show, Bulletproof Screenwriting.
Yakin, by the way.
Yakin, I'm sorry, Yakin, sorry. Yakin. He told me to say that. Boaz, please forgive me. Boaz Yakin. He was a guest on my other show. He told me the story of how you guys have some sort of history with Mr. Tarantino. Were you involved in that?
Yeah. So I'm the one who introduced Quentin to Scott Spiegel, who then introduced him to Lawrence Bender.
Right.
You see the movie Lionheart, okay?
Yeah.
Because
Lawrence is in Lionheart.
Yeah, both of them are. We had a whole circle of friends at the time.
Right.
It included Sam Raimi, and Sam was at that first screening of Bloodsport, by the way. Sam ended up doing at least a couple of movies with Jean-Claude. They did that. He was involved with Time Cop and Hard Target.
Universal, sure, yeah.
I introduced Jean-Claude to Sam Raimi, and Sam was immediately impressed with him. But yeah, we had a whole circle of friends at the time, which included Sam and Bruce Campbell and, some of these Detroit guys. And then there were people I met in LA, like Boaz. I met Boaz through a completely different source. And we all used to hang out together. So I was prepping Lionheart at Imperial Entertainment. And Quentin, who worked in video stores just like you many years ago.
Yes.
Quentin was hired by Imperial to call video stores all over the country to sell them their product, to basically get them to buy, like, hey, come on, you want 5 copies of Ninja versus Zombie, don't you?
But and that was the thing for people don't understand. I understand it because I worked at a video store, but back then, there was hustlers on the phone trying to get you to buy more copies, and this is before sell-through. Like, because before 1995 movies, they were still like at $79 or $99 a tape or something like that, or $79 a tape.
It was expensive, yeah.
So you were like trying to get them, you were trying to get my mom and pop, or not my personal mom and pop, but the owner of my video store to purchase.
That was Quentin Tarantino. That was Quentin calling.
So he was a telemarketer. So Quentin Tarantino was a telemarketer at that time, essentially.
Yeah. And my little my workspace was right across from where Quentin's workspace was. And Quentin comes up to me one day and just bubbling with enthusiasm. He's always bubbling with enthusiasm.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, you're Sheldon Lettich. You co-wrote Thou Shalt Not Kill Except.
Right.
Yeah. It wasn't joking, though. I mean, it was like...
He knew it.
It was like, hey, you co-wrote Citizen Kane, didn't you? Anyways, he was really jazzed about that. So we talked a little bit, and I realized that he was just a fount of trivia. He just knew all this trivia about every movie ever made. And my buddy Scott Spiegel is pretty much the same. Scott actually co-wrote a movie with Boaz. They co-wrote The Rookie, and Scott co-wrote Evil Dead 2. He's basically one of the Detroit guys. He used to hang out with Sam and Bruce and all those guys. And so I tell Quentin, you know what? You really need to meet a friend of mine, Scott Spiegel. He says, whoa, Scott Spiegel! And starts rattling off Scott Spiegel's credits. Like, whoa, Evil Dead 2, Scott Spiegel! He was really excited, so I gave him Scott's phone number, and the two of them, they hit it off right away. And Scotty had been directing a low-budget movie that Lawrence Bender was producing at the time called Intruder.
Yes.
Which Sam Raimi was in, playing the butcher in this grocery store. And so that's how he met Lawrence. And Lawrence was a friend of mine at the time, too, because I cast Lawrence and Scotty in Lionheart. Lawrence has a very memorable role. He's this heckler at one of the fights.
I remember he's in the trailer.
Yeah. Well, I've been auditioning actors to play, the New York heckler. And I just couldn't find anybody who I was really happy with.
Right.
And I thought, you know what, Lawrence would be perfect at playing this guy. So I gave him a call. At the time, he was living in some small apartment over in like the Miracle Mile area, and kind of living paycheck to paycheck. So he's more than happy. He rushes down to do an audition, does an audition, and I cast him in the movie. And he was doing such a good job of heckling Jean-Claude when we were shooting that with cameras rolling, Jean-Claude walks over to him. And Lawrence, he's a trained actor. So he stayed in the moment. Jean-Claude stayed in the moment. And Jean-Claude walks over and grabs Lawrence by his shirt, yanks him, and says, "You and me, right now." And Lawrence did not break character. He stayed with it. And then Harrison Page comes in and separates the two of them. No, man, you don't want to do that. So that was Lawrence's role in the film. And yeah, like you said, they even used it in the trailer. It was a really good little moment. So I was hanging out with these guys, at the time, and a lot of them have moved on to become some pretty prominent names in the business.
They've done okay. They've done okay for themselves. They've done okay. So that's so Quentin's next to you, telemarketing. You introduce him to Scott. Scott eventually introduced him to Lauren Bender, and then the rest is history as far as Lawrence and Quentin go.
Right, yeah. Yeah, well, basically, Quentin showed Lawrence his script.
For Reservoir.
Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, for Reservoir.
Actually, Lawrence, I told you about this project, Strikers Force, that I was going to do at Canon. So Lawrence was going to produce that. Lawrence, I even have a budget that he put together for it. So, Lawrence and I, we were good buddies at the time. Mm-hmm. And he's certainly gone on to do some pretty damn amazing projects.
He did okay for himself. Both of them did okay. It's okay, but it's so fascinating to listen to the stories because I've studied Quentin like every other filmmaker of my generation, and every generation studies like his lore and how he came up and everything. I have never heard that story. I have never heard the story where he was a telemarketer, upselling VHS's copies to video stores around the country.
Right.
I never heard that story in all the things I've heard or read about him.
I have told it to a few people, and I've written about it a few times.
I'm sure it's out there. I just never heard about it. So it's fairly fascinating. And I knew about the whole Intruder thing and Lawrence Bender and how that combination and Quentin didn't want to even make Reservoir for $1 million. Like, I'm going to just go do it for 50 or 60,000 or something.
Oh, actually, there was a very low budget producer named David Pryor at the time. There was David, and he had a brother, and the brother was I forgot the name of their company, but it was like ultra low budget. And the brother, the one who ran the company, I'd have to look up his name now, but previously had been a dancer, and he was one of the Jets in West Side Story, in the movie West Side Story.
Sure.
Yeah, that's right. When you're a jet, you're a jet all. He was one of them.
When you're a jet.
So he wanted to make a very low budget movie with me at the time because of the Rambo III connection. Mm-hmm. And the budget was ridiculous, like $50,000. And I told him, well, look, I don't think I could do this. But so he says, do you have any friends that have got scripts that we could make? Something we can do on a low budget in one location. Well, I got this friend named Quentin Tarantino. And he's got this script called Reservoir Dogs. All takes place in one location. Well, give me his number. Let me call him. So he does call Quentin. Quentin comes in. I think Quentin and Lawrence maybe both came in to meet with him. And he said, we'll do this movie. We'll do Reservoir Dogs. Your budget's going to be $50,000. And fortunately, they turned that down. They actually... They were actually getting ready to shoot Reservoir Dogs on their own in Super 8.
That would have been an interesting film.
Well, I went over to Lawrence's apartment, and Quentin and Lawrence are both there, and they're crunching numbers. They're putting together a budget, and they said, we're gonna shoot Reservoir Dogs one way or another, and right now we're putting together the Super 8 budget. They're going to shoot it in Super 8 for like, I don't know, for like $50,000 or something. Because that's right, Quentin had gotten a bump by selling
True Romance right.
to Sammy Hadida. Mm-hmm. And so now he had like $50,000 that was burning a hole in his pocket. And he said, I'm going to use that hey, Lawrence, we're going to make Reservoir Dogs
for $50,000
in Super 8 with that $50,000. I'm going to put it all into the movie. So I don't know if you heard that one before.
Yeah, I've heard that one. And then Lawrence was like, Lawrence is like, hey, listen, just give me like a month to go find some money. And he
did, yes. Right.
And then it got Harvey involved, and as the rest they say is history. Fascinating little side note.
Prior to Harvey, though, they got I think it was called Live Entertainment. Anyway, it was
Live Entertainment.
Live. And I believe a woman named Ruth Vitale was running it at the time. And the reason that they got involved was because Lawrence got Harvey Keitel interested. Lawrence knew an editor who was also a director. I forgot the guy. I'm blanking on his name right now.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
But this guy knew Harvey Keitel. Anyway, he read Quentin's script and said, let me get this to my buddy, Harvey Keitel. I think he might want to play one of the roles in this. And sure enough, Harvey liked it. He wanted to play, his character in the movie was Mr. White, I believe.
Yeah, it was, yes.
Okay, so basically he said, I like this. I'd love to play Mr. White. And so now they've got Harvey Keitel wanting to be in the movie. So basically, I think Ruth Vitale was an executive at Live at the time. I think Live spun off from Carol Co. Or
I think it was something like that because I remember video store icon. I remember the VHS.
Live did the video releases for Carol Co.
Correct, because they did Terminator 2 and a couple other ones around that time.
So, anyways, now Lawrence and Quentin had Harvey Keitel wanting to be in a movie. So suddenly they're realizing, okay, we got something we can release on video here because Harvey Keitel has got his name above the title. So we got a big star. We got Harvey Keitel. And then one thing led to another, and then they ended up getting enough money to shoot. I think the budget was about $1 million.
Yeah, something like that.
And they discovered all these people like Steve Buscemi,
Michael Madsen, Tim Roth.
Yeah, but I think Lawrence knew Virginia Madsen.
Oh, okay.
My sister, and I think she's the one that said, "Hey, can you put my brother Michael in this thing?" Okay.
Chris Penn, it was a remarkable. But thank you for that little side note on your connection with Mr. Tarantino, because that I wanted to hear it from your mouth because Boaz told me a little bit about it, but you elaborated a bit more. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I'm the hookup guy. Okay? I've actually hooked up a lot of people.
Good for you. That's awesome. But look, hey, that's what it's all. I always try to, when I have, if I have the ability to help somebody, I try to, if I can at all. Now you wrote Rambo III, with Sly, and I just got to, and I have Sly on my shirt here, from First Blood.
Right. You gotta get to that.
Yeah, from First Blood, obviously. And First Blood is a masterpiece, and then Rambo 2 was it was a sensation.
I love Rambo 2.
Sensation, co-written by Mr. Jimmy Cameron at the time. I think this is pre-Aliens, after Terminator, but it's pre-Aliens for that when he wrote. So Rambo 2 was amazing. So you're now tasked to write a sequel to an extremely popular film, which is Rambo 3. What is it like work? Because at that point, Sly, like he's at the height of his power at that point.
He was the number one star
in the world. Yeah, he was the guy in the world. And so at the height of his power, and you're tasked to work with him. What was that experience writing Rambo 3 with him?
Well, let me tell you how I got the gig. First of all, I told you about my script Firebase, my Vietnam-based version of Zulu. Mm-hmm. So Stallone was looking for somebody to write Rambo 3 with him. So he put the word out to agents. My agent sends him Firebase. He loved Firebase. Calls me in, and he wanted to actually make Firebase. So he's another guy that wanted to make Firebase. So I'm going to make this movie one of these days. Now's not the time. Vietnam still kind of a taboo subject, but I'm going to make this thing. And he would have been perfect in it, by the way. So based upon that and the fact that I was also a Vietnam veteran, like the real deal.
Mm-hmm. Not Frank Duke style, but like a real deal.
like the real deal. Yeah. It's actually got a DD-214 that says, served in Vietnam from this date to this date.
Right.
So he thought that would be a good qualification for a co-writer for a Rambo film. And it turns out that it was. I did my research on Afghanistan and the war over there. Actually, I used to read, there was a magazine called Soldier of Fortune at the time that was constantly doing articles about Afghanistan and, the CIA and Afghanistan. This stuff was pretty much under the radar with what we'll call the mainstream media. That's the new term now. You didn't read much about it, but Soldier of Fortune was all over it. And they were doing interviews with actual mujahideen. They had a lot of the background information that I needed to write this thing. And another thing, on my first meeting with Stallone, we were both on the same page as far as where Rambo III was supposed to take place. Rambo II, Southeast Asia. Rambo III, well, what's going on in the world right now that Rambo would want to get involved with? Or that Rambo, where is there a conflict with Americans and Russians? Because Russians were also the bad guys in Rambo II. So Americans versus Russians, foreign country, war zone.
Perfect.
Afghanistan was the only thing that made any kind of sense at all. And Stallone and I both had the exact same idea. We both wanted it to take place in Afghanistan. And the idea was that Troutman goes in first. Now, here's where Stallone and I differed. And I gave him my perspective on it, and he agreed with me. So look, these big action stars like Stallone, they got an ego, but Stallone's ego is not so big that he would reject a good idea. And his first notion was, so Troutman is going on a mission because the CIA did used to send Americans over there to sell Stinger missiles. Stinger was a ground-to-air missile that could shoot down a helicopter. So Troutman's going over there, and basically the idea was that Rambo goes to Afghanistan as well, somehow connected to Troutman. But Stallone's idea was, when Troutman comes to him and says, "Hey, I'm going to Afghanistan, Johnny. Would you come and help me?" Well, let me just go get my gear. So basically, he's just on board from the get-go. And I felt that sounds very wrong to me, because Rambo is the baddest badass in the world,
obviously.
But he's seen too much war, too much death, too much destruction. He's done with that shit. He doesn't want to go to a war zone. He doesn't want to be. He doesn't want to kill anybody else.
It has to be the reluctant. It has to be the reluctant hero. You have to.
Okay. Right. And that's one thing that's so appealing about the Rambo character, is that he's the baddest motherfucker in the world, but doesn't want to get involved, doesn't want to fight.
Because he's seen too much already. He's done too much.
And to use an expression that we used a lot back in the 80s, until he was pushed too
far. in a world where water is wet and ice is cold.
Right. Yeah. So
that line was used so much in every 80s. Like,
absolutely.
Until he was pushed too far.
And for Rambo 3, yeah, he doesn't want to go. He wants to stay in his monastery in Thailand.
Right. Until he was pushed too far.
He's pursuing the peaceful path until he was pushed too far. So Troutman goes, and Troutman gets captured. And now Rambo is feeling guilty, okay? Because Troutman asked him for help. He didn't go.
He's pulled it.
Because of his wimpy reasoning, like, no, my war is over, Sam. I can't go with you. I've had enough of this shit. So now he's guilty, all right? Now his buddy Troutman, his mentor Troutman,
he's everything.
Has been captured by the evil empire in Afghanistan, and the CIA is not going to send anybody in to rescue him. They can't, because of politics. The CIA guy, Kurtwood Smith is the guy, comes to Rambo and says, "Hey, we just want you to know, we know where Troutman is, but we can't do anything about it. We're just letting you know in case you want to go rescue your buddy. So that became the basis for the story.
Very, very cool. And then, I mean, working with someone like Sly must have been, wonderful. And the movie came out. I remember when the movie came out, it wasn't as big of a hit as First Blood 2, but it did business. The gestation period was way too long between the two movies.
No, just from the time that Stallone decided he wanted to do Rambo III and Afghanistan until the movie came out. Because there were a lot of roadblocks along the way. Sly was one of them. He started becoming nervous about Afghanistan because it started going into the news cycle every day. People were hearing about Afghanistan. There are negative things being said about Americans getting involved, about the CIA giving Stinger missiles to the Mujahideen, and it started sounding like a hot potato to him, and he decided to back off. There was another storyline we came up with that took place in Siberia, okay, of all places. An American pilot gets shot down in Siberia. Rambo goes to rescue him. He crosses the Bering Strait, and there's Russians that are after this guy. He hasn't been captured yet, but he's shot down. So there's Russian bad guys again. Rambo has to fight off the Russian bad guys, gets him to safety. And it was kind of based on a book. I forgot who wrote it now. I think it might have been Louis L'Amour. It's called Last of the Breed. And Last of the Breed was basically the same kind of story. So then they changed. So I wrote. I'm pretty sure I wrote a few treatments for that one. So now we're talking about snow and ice in Siberia, and then they got. Then he went back to Afghanistan. Then they got Russell Mulcahy hired to direct the movie. And they sent poor Russell all over the world. And I'm not making this up, okay? My first suggestion to Stallone, when they were talking about where they're going to shoot this thing, where can we do Afghanistan? I said, what about Israel? Because I had been to Israel before. I was hired by Canon to do a rewrite on. It was one of the Delta Force movies.
Right.
Yeah, Delta Force 2. I was hired to do a rewrite on that. So I've been to Israel. I've been shown all around. And I told Sly, I think Israel would be a perfect place to shoot this movie. And he said, I ain't going to no Israel. Okay? Because there's it's not the best vacation spot, let's just say. Right. Actually, it is a very good vacation.
You know what I mean.
Yeah.
Especially those years.
Huh?
Especially in those years.
Yeah, we're still. Well, there were wars going on at the time. Like when I was over there working on the Chuck Norris movie, I'd see planes flying north towards Lebanon. I'd hear explosions. Okay, so there was shit going on, but Sly didn't want to go. He was nervous about it, and they sent poor Russell Mulcahy all over the world. They even had him looking in Canada, like some of the middle provinces in Canada. I think there's good production deals there. Had him going to. I know he went.
So where did you guys finally shoot? Where did they finally shoot?
Israel.
Oh, they did shoot Israel.
They basically came back to my original idea, which was Israel. Israel would be perfect. They have a film industry there. They have technicians.
Sure.
And they've got the thing about Israel is they've got all this captured Soviet equipment. They've got Soviet tanks.
Right.
They've got Soviet armored personnel characters because the Soviets had been supplying all the Arab countries, and they had these wars, and the Israelis won the wars, and then they'd have the spoils of war. So they had all this shit laying around.
Beautiful.
In addition to the only thing that Israel didn't have was the high mountains, but not every part of Afghanistan is high mountains. There's a deserty part.
Mm-hmm.
So
it all worked. It all worked out.
It all worked out just great.
So I know, if I go into every movie in your filmography, we'll need at least 20 hours for this podcast.
We will, yes.
At least 20 hours. So because I mean, Lionheart and your work on Cyborg and just working with the Cannon Boys in general, but Legionnaire and all the Order and things like that. But to kind of wrap this up, I just wanted, you had such an impact on Jean-Claude's career, and Jean-Claude had a major impact on your career. You guys are very, very symbiotic relationship. And you did, how many did you finally do with Jean-Claude? Like what?
I directed 4.
4 directed, but you worked on, from what I saw, like either polishes.
Yeah, maybe a dozen.
Right. I mean, Jean-Claude always had you in his back pocket working with him in one way, shape, or form, as a co-writer or a polisher, or script doctor and things. So, how is that relationship? I mean, it's very similar to, Scorsese and De Niro in a sense, because they both came up. I mean,
people have made that comparison.
Constantly. Very
flattered.
It's just like it, but a slight bit different. Less kicking on the Scorsese side. But you've had this kind of really symbiotic relationship with a star, and you were there literally at the very beginning when he was kicking guys on the street to get attention,
right?
Or close to kicking guys in the street. So how have you worked? How was it working with him on things like Lionheart and Double Impact, and you're working Lionheart was a studio project, if I remember right. It was it a Universal?
No, it was Columbia.
I'm sorry, it was Columbia, right? But these are, you've left the Canon world and started playing in the big leagues when Jean-Claude started going into. I remember going to the theater to see Lionheart and Double Impact. I remember Double Impact perfectly. I was on a date. We were in the back row. We were doing other things other than watching your film, but I always had an eye on the screen, sir. And and it was amazing. So how was it working with him and kind of growing together as two artists?
Right. Well, now we're getting into hours and hours of discussion.
So let's wrap it into a 10 or 15 minute conversation, and then we'll wrap. Because I know you probably have to go to the bathroom. I know I do. So let's wrap it up.
We could wrap it up. We could come back to this another time.
But I would love to. I would love to hear that. I would love to hear the answer to that.
Well, it changed over the course of years. We had a much stronger relationship at first, and then we had people trying to get in between us. Once he started becoming really famous and popular, we had people trying to pry us apart. People bad-mouthing me so that they could get their client working with Jean-Claude instead of me working with him all the time. Right. But Jean-Claude would always keep coming back to me because there was a certain comfort level. Now, basically, and where that comfort level stemmed from was the fact that I always believed in him. From the moment I met him, I believed this guy could be a movie star, but this guy can also be a good actor. So I was the first one to really take him seriously as an actor, and to actually give him dialogue, to actually give him emotions to express, and to not just be a kicking and punching machine, to not just be a karate guy. Because at the time when I first got to know him, people just saw him as a karate guy. He was basically in Chuck Norris land, and Chuck's a pretty big star in his own right, but right. Nobody would ever put Chuck Norris in something like Lionheart. Okay, right. Got to show his emotion. Got to show his soft, caring, emotional side.
Right.
Like Double Impact would not have been a Chuck Norris movie.
Legionnaire would have.
Legionnaire would not have been a Chuck Norris movie.
Right.
Michael Dudikoff was a bit more of a more sensitive, like an actor. He started out being an actor, but Michael Dudikoff couldn't do the action stuff. He couldn't fight. He's not a fighter. Mm-hmm. So I saw that in Jean-Claude, and he could see that I was trying to bring him out as an actor, not just a karate guy, not just here's like 2 lines of dialogue, and now get out there and beat the shit out of 10 people. Okay?
Right.
That's not how I was approaching it. And so we kind of bonded over the fact that I believed in him and he believed in me. Like I said, along the way, people started getting jealous of this relationship and were wondering why did I have his ear and they couldn't get his ear? Why was he listening to me and not listening to them? So that hurt things to a degree, but I still managed to direct 4 movies of his. And
we'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. And work with him on a dozen projects.
I'll write a lot of stuff.
And you guys still friends? You guys still talk?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's. I mean, when I saw JCVD come out, I thought that was like amazing on his part, and
absolutely
the acting that people were like, wait a minute, Jean-Claude's a really good actor. He is. He's just never given the opportunity because other than like that's why Lionheart holds so well, because it just there's an emotion. It's not just a bunch of kicking and right. Yeah. There's something there.
There's real characters. I think Harrison Page helped a lot too.
Right.
The black guy that was in it with him.
Yes, he was wonderful. He was wonderful. But yeah, those must have been great time. And like, I mean, seriously, I know we could talk about canon and all the other stuff that you've gone through. I mean, when's your biography coming out, Sheldon? I mean, seriously.
It's fun. I'm just in the midst of starting to talk to people about that right now.
So should write one.
I've had a few friends that have told me I should write a biography or autobiography.
Yeah.
And I've only started taking it seriously just in the last few weeks. Like just yesterday, I found out that there's a whole book on Sam Furstenberg.
Mm-hmm.
You know who Sam Furstenberg?
I know the name sounds familiar, but who is he?
He directed some ninja movies for Canon. Right. He was basically sort of an in-house.
Right. You're saying that. Yeah.
Never branched out to other studios, other kinds of movies, just ninja movies for Canon, Michael Dudikoff movies. There's a whole damn book about the guy. I just saw this yesterday. Here, I don't know if you can see this, but it's like stories from the trenches.
Yeah.
But wait a second. Somebody put out a whole book. I think it's. I don't know if how much it's written. It might be more like a scrapbook.
I'm telling you, you're sitting on a pile of gold, Sheldon. You absolutely need to write your own biography. There's a lot of filmmakers out there. The guy, oh God, what's his name? They call the book True Indie. He did Boba Kohep with Bruce Campbell.
Oh, right. The guy who directed those.
He did a couple of like
movie with the flying.
Phantasm. He did Phantasm. Yeah, and all of those. He wrote a whole book about his experiences in the indie world and doing those movies. I mean, Jesus, Sheldon. I mean, look what you've done in your career. You should absolutely do that.
Right. Well, I touched a lot. I think I touched a lot of bases. I wasn't just like the Cannon guy or the Van Damme guy.
Right.
I worked with Stallone. I worked with Chuck Norris.
Joaquin Phoenix. Joaquin Phoenix.
I didn't really work with him.
I know. I'm joking. But yeah.
He touches my biography.
Sure.
But I did work on some big movies and movies that are still, people still love these movies. They still, I get residuals, so I know people are watching this stuff. Okay?
Right, so you get those little checks from Lionheart still and Double Impact still. Someone's watching them.
They're not little checks either.
That's great. That's awesome. Yeah, that's.
And every time I do an interview that gets that gets put on YouTube or wherever.
Sure.
I get a bump in residuals because people realize that I should check out Double Impact. I've never seen it, and so it ends up helping. But beyond the financial, because who knows how much money I can make from a book? I'm not really thinking about that.
Sure.
People are just telling me, you've got this interesting story to tell. Why aren't you telling it?
You're a storyteller. Why wouldn't you?
Right.
I even wrote a book about an experience of me making a movie for the Mafia, $20 million movie for the Mafia when I was 26. And that I'm selling that, and it's been a bestseller. So if I can write a book about a short year of my life as a filmmaker, I promise you could sell a book about your career.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've been reading a few biographies lately just to get an idea of how these things are done. Mm-hmm. Oliver Stone wrote one, which is really good, really well written. I'll take a look at this. I just ordered the Sam Furstenberg.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Oliver was on the show talking about his book, and it's that book. I read that book. He's like, you're sitting there going, listening, and his career, it stops at Platoon. So that book stops at Platoon. And he's like, he still has an obscene amount of career left. He's like, I'm writing the second part next. But it's so detailed about Scarface and Conan and all this stuff. And you have those kind of stories, but in your filmography of Bloodsport and Rambo and
I've got a year in Vietnam too.
There's a little bit of that as well. I mean, you are arguably one of the most interesting filmmakers I've ever spoken to. So it's been really great. I want to ask you a few questions. I ask all my guests, or like rapid fire. What advice would you give a filmmaker trying to break into the business today?
Make a movie.
It's a lot cheaper now than it was when you started out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it cost me a Firefight, which was shot in 16 millimeter. Cost me about $25,000 to make. Now, we're talking $25,000 in the 80s. Okay, so that would be a lot more now. And we shot on film. I blew it up to 35 millimeter, but it got me my first few directing gigs. It wasn't just with Menachem. That's how I ended up directing Lionheart also, because Jean-Claude wanted me to direct Lionheart. The producer, Sunil Shah, was very nervous. I had no feature films that I had directed. We show him Firefight. It's like 20 minutes long, 35 millimeter. You can watch it in the screening room. It's not like I gave people a VHS. Mm-hmm. No, we got to go in the screening room. I had a deal with Dino De Laurentiis. Mm-hmm. Actually, this is another interesting project that never happened. It was called Atlas. Mm-hmm. Jean-Claude had an idea for a movie called Atlas, which is basically Spartacus in the future, Spartacus in space. And so guess who was going to produce this? Sam Raimi was going to produce this. Chuck Farr, who wrote Darkman and Hard Target, co-wrote the script with me. Dino De Laurentiis and Raffaello De Laurentiis were going to be the executive producers. We had this thing set up at DEG. Now, how did I get that gig? Sam really liked my little Firefight movie, and he made Dino watch it in his 35 millimeter screening room. Dino saw the movie; he was impressed. So there you go. You make a movie. That shows what you're capable of, or it shows that you're capable of pulling something like this together, shooting it. It might not be something that's going to win an Oscar, but it just shows that I actually did it. I got the people together. I got the location. I got the money. We shot this thing. It works. It tells a story. So that's the best advice I could give anybody.
What is the lesson that took the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
In the film business, I learned to be assertive and to not take shit from people. When you're directing your first movie, I don't know if it happens to everybody, but it sure happened to me. Everybody on the set, they've worked on lots of other movies. They think they know more than you, and they're either downgrading your ideas, saying that's not going to work. You've got to do it this way. You've got to, if you're going to shoot a over the shoulder shot, then you have to have a complementary over the shoulder shot to cut to. Not necessarily, but they'll tell you that. So basically, I learned to just trust my own instincts a lot more, rather than taking. You got to take some advice, of course, but you got to learn how to filter out the wheat from the chaff. You got to learn whose advice you should listen to and whose advice you should ignore. So that was an important lesson to learn.
And 3 of your favorite films of all time.
not an action movie among them. Okay, the 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Always a popular choice on the show.
Right. Fellini's 8.5.
Another one.
Okay, another one.
Yeah.
And The Godfather 1 and 2.
And probably the top of all of the movies that get mentioned. That from all my guests, they're Godfather generally. They generally lumping Godfather 1 and 2 together.
Right. Oh yeah. No, you've got to lump the two of them. You can't just say 2
1.
Because you've got to have the preface, which is 1.
Right. All fantastic choices. And obviously, you look at those 3 movies and you get Bloodsport, obviously. I mean, you just think about it.
Right.
I mean, it's obvious.
Add those 3 together and...
Lionheart shows up. I get it. I understand. Sheldon, it has been an absolute pleasure and honor talking to you. It's been a thrill. And again, that little kid at the video store is very grateful for this conversation. So thank you again so much.
And that little kid knows that Quentin Tarantino was doing the exact same thing.
Which makes
you knew that already.
Yes, I did. But that makes me sad because Kevin Smith was doing the same thing and Quentin Tarantino and my careers are all very vastly different. But we all have our paths to walk. But thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
Okay. Good talking to you, Alex. And we should do it again sometime if you want to. All right?
I want to thank Sheldon for coming on the show, dropping his knowledge bombs, and taking us back down nostalgia lane, reliving the amazing 80s action genre that he helped create. Thank you so much, Sheldon. If you want to get links to anything we spoke about in this episode, please head over to the show notes at bulletproofscreenwriting.tv/163. And if you haven't already, please head over to screenwritingpodcast.com, subscribe, and leave a good review for the show. It truly helps us out a lot. Thank you again for listening, guys. As always, keep on writing no matter what. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast at bulletproofscreenwriting.tv.